Autism and Epilepsy. This is her on the left. So this is my reason for learning about autism. And then on the right is our family. So you can see that she's the oldest of three. And so she is always, we also have the sibling dynamic at our house as well.
And hi, my name is Erin Enyart, and these are my two kids. My daughter who's 16 and my son who's 15, and they both are on the autism spectrum. So that's why I'm here, and I look forward to sharing our story this morning.
Tyler, do you want to introduce yourself as well at this point?
Sure, Kris. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Leech. I'm 28 years old and I have autism. I've been on the board with Kris and Erin since 2017, and I look forward to sharing more about my journey with you people later on.
Thanks, Tyler. Autism is a complex developmental disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavioral challenges. People with autism may communicate, interact, behave, and learn in ways that are different from most other people. It's also a spectrum. So somebody can be severely impacted by their autism, needing a lot of substantial support, may have some behaviors that can impede sometimes going forward. And somebody can also just be very capable and just have a lot of wonderful skills that even the autism can contribute to. So it is a complete spectrum. Social skills are often an issue for those with autism. They may lack eye contact. They may prefer to be alone. They may not be interested in other children. Sometimes a lack of social awareness and personal boundaries happens. This is one of the things that we have at our house. My daughter always sits in the same pew at church. Even if somebody else is already sitting there, she'll just sit with them. If we go to the doctor's office, every time she sits in the same exact chair. So if somebody is already sitting there, she may just stand there and look at them like, this is my chair. Why are you there? So that is something that we have to work on. They may not respond to their name. The inability to interpret verbal cues or gestures is sometimes impacted. And then also a lot of times they'll take things literally. This is a picture of my two oldest when they were younger. They're 20 months apart. And so at that time, we knew that there were some differences right away. With my daughter, when she was born, she did not sleep through the night. She would sleep for 5 hours and then take a break and then maybe sleep for a couple more hours. We also knew right away that some things were different. She preferred to spin. She didn't always have an interest in other children, although she really liked her brother when he got a little older. And we also knew that when she was 2 years old, she taught herself how to read. She could not communicate, but she could read. And so she was diagnosed at the age of 3. At that time, you had to be 3 for a diagnosis. Now it's 18 months. And at the University of Iowa, and was diagnosed with autism. So she started a special education preschool. And we told them that she could read, and the teachers said to us, oh, a lot of times kids just will see like the McDonald's sign, or they just recognize different words. And just 2 weeks into preschool, they let us know that they had done an evaluation, and indeed she could read, and she could read at a very high level. And she was able to respond to questions from what she was reading. But she still could not communicate. And even to this day, she still reads at a very high level. She is able to understand what she's reading, but she still needs help tying her shoes and personal care skills. And so that's, one of the difficulties sometimes with autism. Everyone is different, and they may have great skills in one area and still some basic skills that they need assistance with.
So another area is communication skills. A lot of times individuals with autism will repeat words, dialogues, sentences, or parts of movies to try and communicate. They may give unrelated answers to questions. They may prefer to always talk about a certain topic of interest to them, be it dinosaurs, science, math, television shows, movies. They may have a lack of interest in pretend play. They may not understand jokes or sarcasm. They cannot explain what he or she might want to someone. They might have difficulty, letting you know if they're in pain. They might have difficulty letting you know if they need something. And they also may be unable to follow directions. So both of my kids are nonverbal. When they were younger, both maybe had a couple words that they said, but they have not expanded on that vocabulary at all. And so when they were very young, we got them both into speech therapy, which is actually kind of how our journey started, because I had my daughter evaluated for a speech delay, which then led to an autism diagnosis when she was about 2 years old. But we started with sign language and used sign language for a few months, but then realized that sign language is difficult because most people don't know sign language. So there's still that breakdown of communication if you don't know sign language. So we started using a PECS book, which is a picture exchange communication system, which is what you'll see on the left. It's basically just pictures with Velcro on the back that the child can use to communicate what they want by building sentences. So you can see, this is just an example, they might say, I want water, I want a snack, I want a TV show. So we used that for quite a while and then moved on to a communication device, which is what you'd see there on the right. We got through our speech therapist when the kids were younger. And so it's basically just kind of like a small laptop iPad, and has buttons programmed in with things that they can use to ask for what they need. They can also be programmed in with things from school, so we can take pictures of people and add them in as buttons, add places in that they might want to go to. So we used a device similar to that for quite a while. The picture up here on the left is just my kids both in a therapy session, communicating back and forth with their devices, asking for a piece of the puzzle, kind of back and forth with each other. And then the device on the right is an updated device that my kids both have now. It's much smaller and lighter, looks a lot like an iPad. And we can actually program it to even have more buttons than this on the front page. So as they expand their vocabulary, we'll be able to have it grow with them, which is really great. And they could also we also have an iPad for each of them that has an app on it they can use if for some reason we don't have their device with them. So there are options if an individual is nonverbal or not always able to communicate everything. They can expand on the communication they have with devices, or like I said, the PECS book, or whatever system works for them.
But sometimes those with autism will show an unusual attachment to toys or objects or routine. They sometimes always like to have things be just the same. They'll spend time lining things up or putting things in a certain order that makes sense just to them. They'll get stuck doing the same things over and over and can't move on to other things. And also they might play with toys the same way, which might not be the typical way to play with toys. Sometimes also they'll flap their hands or rock their body or spin, just as a calming mechanism as well. This is my daughter when she was little, when she was 7 on the left. She was able to put together the puzzle of the United States very quickly. But as far as pretend play or trying to learn to play with dolls or play kitchen or anything like that, she just was not able to learn those skills quickly. It really had to be taught to her. It did not come naturally. And on the right, you can see that she's in the sandbox, but she never played with the toys in the sandbox. She always just used the sand to put on her for sensory. She always craved some sensory input, and so she would just rub the sand on her as a calming mechanism, and that was her way of playing in the sandbox. Also on the left, as you know, she's the oldest of 3 children, and the others, would have a teddy bear or a blanket or something. She always had an odd object that she was attached to, and it'd always be something that like plastic, or that had a little bit of give so that she could push it in and out as a calming way, also for sensory input again. And this is a time when she always carried an empty milk jug with her all the time. And so, the others would be tucked in with a teddy bear or something, and she would just be tucked in with her empty milk jug.
And then the picture on the right is my son. This is kind of an example of how both of my kids would play with toys. They would just do a lot of lining up of, their little people, or, stuffed animals, or things that they found in the playroom. They didn't do a lot of, the pretend play. They didn't do a lot of playing with the toys appropriately. All of that had to be taught to them in therapy, but this is kind of what they would do with their toys, and they would line them up in a particular order. Each time it was the same order that made sense to them. And so this is kind of an example of what you would see when my kids were playing with toys. The picture on the left is my daughter at a wedding. This is just another, she went around and picked up all of the table decor and started lining it up. This is actually fairly recent, not last summer, but the summer before. And then on the right is my daughter. For a while, she really loved this pumpkin, and she would carry it with her everywhere. So like Kris mentioned, they might form an attachment to something that, is not a typical stuffed animal or toy, and play with it and want to sleep with it, just like they would at a typical toy. Behavior issues. Some things you might see are difficulty with minor changes in their routine. A lot of individuals with autism are very routine oriented, so they need that routine and to have that control in their day. They may exhibit repetitive behaviors, may smell or mouth objects, may have issues with textures of their clothes or tags in clothes. You see a lot of that where, they might have a specific thing that they need to wear because it's comfortable for them. They may prefer certain food textures. A lot of individuals with autism have a very, very limited diet because of certain things that they can tolerate to eat. And they may have self-stimulatory behaviors such as tapping feet. We mentioned some of, flapping their hands, spinning, some of those things we've mentioned. This is examples of my son, who he's very routine oriented. So the picture on the left is during a Christmas vacation. He really loves to go to school, and that's kind of his whole routine is based on that. So breaks and Christmas and summer breaks are very difficult. So this was after a couple days of him asking to go to school. He just, he needs that routine in his day. So makes things difficult at home sometimes. This is, I believe it was a Christmas or a Thanksgiving at a relative's house. Got to be a little bit too much for him, so he was hiding under the bed. Just those breaks and, those different things that you might do with your family that are not in your own home, things that you might need to prepare for in advance. Some of those things are just difficult. And then the picture on the right is he used to climb, he's way too big to do this now, but he used to climb into the dryer a lot. He would shut the door, but he would just sit in there, and sometimes with the clean clothes and sometimes when nothing was in there, just kind of as a way to block out some of that noise and some of that light, especially if there were other people in our home. So that's kind of a couple of the things you might see, just to, avoid some of those situations that are difficult for them. The word stimming refers to self-stimulatory behaviors, which usually involve repetitive movements or sounds. Stimming helps individuals with autism self-regulate. So those behaviors do not need to be eliminated. They're, something that they need to do in order to adapt to their surroundings, in order to keep themselves in control. But stimming should be addressed if it's disruptive to others and interferes with their quality of life. So you like I said, you might see some of the hand flapping, a lot of spinning, jumping. Some of those things are to get that sensory input that they need. And so you might see some of those behaviors. Other behaviors you might see is hyperactivity. So they might be very, very active, kind of running around, things like that. That's, like I said, they might need that sensory input. Impulsivity, acting without thinking. They might have a short attention span. They may have aggression to themselves, like causing self-injury to themselves. They may have aggression with others. Unusual eating and sleeping habits, lack of fear or more fear than that might be expected. And they also may have unusual reactions to the way things sound, smell, taste, look, or feel. They might be extra sensitive to certain kinds of light, or, if an environment is very loud, if an environment is something you might not notice, might bother them more than it would bother the typical person.
Erin, someone asked if you could go back to the stimming slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
So like I said, this is a lot of what you might see if you say you're out in the community. Stimming, that a lot of what I see with my kids a lot of the time is spinning and hand flapping, and they also tend to tiptoe walk on their tiptoes a lot. And it's just a sensory input that they need on their feet. And so, that's just something that kind of, I addressed when my kids were young. I addressed their classmates about that when they were very young. And I was like, you might see these behaviors, visual stimming, where my son will sometimes hold something up to his face really close because he wants to see it really close. My daughter also makes a lot of noises. So those are just things that we've addressed as they've grown up with their classmates and their peers, and just said, these are the noises they make when they're happy. It's just something that, sometimes they go through phases where they do more or less of it. But yeah, stimming is, I would say, very common. I don't know if Kris wants to add on to that at all, but.
No, I know Lynn had said she's trying to take a snapshot of each slide.
Oh, okay.
Jenny, will the recording of this be available to her afterwards to share with her daughter?
Great question. Yes, we are recording this presentation and it will be posted online, and I will make sure that I also get a link sent to everybody who participates today. You should be able to find it through our website or our YouTube page, but just in case, because I know sometimes it's hard to track them down, I will be sending out this recording to everybody. It may take a couple days to do that.
Thank you.
And so, like I mentioned all these behaviors before, but so these are also some of the behaviors that you might see. And I think there's a couple more slides dealing with this. So the two main issues that we find at our house are sleep and a limited diet. So the picture on the left is my son. My kids are they have very, very disrupted sleep. So generally they go to bed, by about 9 o'clock at night, but they wake up around 2, usually between 2 and 3 in the morning, and then they do not go back to sleep. So, they get a good solid, maybe like 5 hours of sleep, and then they're up the rest of the day. So, and because of their, even though they're a little bit older, because of, dangers and things like that, generally they do have to have an adult up with them. So it's just, it makes for long days for the adults in their life. But I have noticed as they've gotten a little bit older, things have been getting better as they're teenagers now. So we're, hopeful that their sleep schedules will regulate. And the picture on the right is my son. This is the first time he ever ate pizza. My son has a very limited diet. There's about five to 6 foods that he eats. And so he doesn't eat anything soft, and he actually never ate anything soft, even baby food or anything like that. He kind of skipped right from milk to crunchy foods. So it's just a texture issue that he's always had. And so, we've done food therapy, and we continue to try to introduce him to new foods. And he's added a couple things, pizza, peanut butter toast. There's a couple things he has added. So we'll just keep working on that. But for most, it is a texture issue to where they can't tolerate, those soft foods and things like that. So, so that is something we deal with at my house. Sensory issues can involve being hypersensitive, so they're overly responsive to stimulus, and then hyposensitive to where they don't respond to that stimuli. So the sight, sounds, smells, taste, touch. The picture on the top is my family at the pumpkin patch. You can see my daughter's plugging her ears. She plugs her ears the majority of the time just to block out a lot of that background noise. And so that's something that we're working on. She doesn't really like headphones, so she prefers to just plug her ears. And then the picture underneath is my son just at home in this foam squeeze pad that we have, just to kind of give him that sensory input that he needs. And he uses that a lot at our house.
Tyler, do you want to talk a little bit about your sensory challenge?
Yes, I can talk about that, Kris. I am the founder of what is called the Barefoot Autism Challenge. As someone who is autistic, I too have some of the sensory issues that other people who are autistic have. One of the things that I do a lot of the time, especially with working from home, is being barefoot. I found that being barefoot helps you be more grounded and be more aware of your surroundings. In fact, one of the things I enjoy doing is go on barefoot nature walks. My challenge basically has people understand the sensory aspect of autism, in which it challenges them to be barefoot in a different area other than home and explain how it feels for them and what advocating for someone who's autistic means to them. We do it every April because it's Autism Awareness Month.
Thanks, Tyler. And Tyler, if people want to learn more about your challenge, where do they find that at?
You can find my challenge on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all with the same name.
Thanks, Tyler.
Easy.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
So here's a few more pictures of my kids kind of doing some of that sensory input. These are just some things we have at home that they can use. And there's my son in a ball pit. He used to like to get in there and just cover himself with all of those balls. And then in the middle is him on his exercise ball on the couch, but he's usually on an exercise ball the majority of the day at school as well. We've just found that it helped him a lot rather than sitting in a chair. If he had that sensory input from the ball, it just really helped him stay engaged in school. And so that's one of the things that we have written into his IEP. And then there's my daughter jumping on the trampoline. We also have a pool in the backyard. We have a sand and water table, just a lot of those things that give them that sensory input. We've just found that's just one of the ways that helps calm them a lot of the time at home. Self-injurious behaviors, an area of concern are self-injurious behaviors. So This is where an individual will cause physical harm to themselves, such as headbanging or biting. These behaviors are much more common in children with autism than those who are typically developing or have other developmental disabilities. So some of the things I see a lot of the times with my kids are picking at their skin a lot. So, they have a lot of just pick, areas where they pick their skin on their arms. My daughter bites her fingernails down to where there's basically no fingernail left, because once, she gets, like a hangnail or something, she just picks at it a lot to where they bleed. We don't deal with the head banging and the biting as much, but we do have some of those behaviors that we've worked to try to eliminate with medication, and also just, some therapies and things they can do instead.
And safety, it often can be a big issue for those with autism, because sometimes they don't have a real fear of danger or insensitivity to pain. Some of the most common dangers for those with autism are wandering. Also, they sometimes will eat or crave substances other than normal food. We had this when my daughter was very young. She would eat the leaves off of plants sometimes, or household toxins. And also researchers have found that nearly half of children with autism attempt to wander or run from a safe, supervised place. And more than half of these wandering often end up by water. They have are kind of drawn to water. It's a place where all of the sensitivities that they may have are gone. And so that's one of the things that are always of concern, is drowning with someone with autism. These are some of the different safety items that both Erin and I use. One that has the shoelace. It also has the emergency alert. So this can be on the window of the car. It also can be on the window of a house. A couple of other things is sometimes this is a seatbelt cover that we use for my daughter, because if she was in an accident and the driver was incapacitated, she would not be able to give a lot of information. And then the sheet on the right has all of her information, which is in the glove compartment for first responders. She lives in a home in Polk County where we have E911. So all of her information, including her medications, that the fact that if there's a fire, she may not respond to a fireman coming asking, is everybody out of the house? Some of those things are all on E911. So if 911 is called, and from that, with that address, all of that information comes up on the screen as well for first responders. This also has, if she was walking and would have a seizure or she would get lost, she has a shoe ID also on her shoe, which would be easy for any first responder or someone to find. It simply has like her name, our name, and our cell phone number. So it doesn't have private information, but it does have a phone numbers to be able to contact, so that we could be alerted that she was found or had wandered.
Another safety concern that a lot of families have is that their child may have a high tolerance for pain, and that's something that we have with both of my kids. These pictures are from 2015. My daughter seemed to just have a stomach bug, and so we had taken her to the doctor, and they had done an exam and told us that it was probably just a virus. And then within a couple days, she had deteriorated a lot. So we took her to urgent care, and they said again it was just a virus. And by the next morning, we had taken her to the emergency room, and her appendix had burst the previous day. And so with really no notice from her. She was playing and jumping on her trampoline and in what looked to be no pain at all. So she ended up being in the NICU for 10 days and then in the hospital for 18 days. And so a lot of times they will have that high tolerance for pain. So they may break a bone, they may, hurt themselves and you wouldn't even know it. So that's just another concern that, a lot of families don't think about, being able to tell your parent, or, someone that you're not feeling well. So that's just, another thing that, that families have to think about. Luckily, she made a full recovery and they removed her appendix and she's doing well. So transitioning is another area that they may have difficulties with, shifting their attention from one task to another. And also, like I mentioned, those changes in routine. So this is kind of one of the things we use in school and also during therapy is a first then schedule. So this is kind of just with us, it's just on Velcro. So my son, they'll put a picture down, first you do your work, then you can be on the computer, or first you do your work and then you can be on your iPad. And so it's just kind of that motivation. It shows them, first you do this task you don't really want to do, and then you'll get rewarded. So that really helps in those transitions from a less preferred to a more preferred activity. Here's another example. This is what my kids also use a lot during therapy. So first we're going to put this puzzle together, then we'll bounce on a ball, and they start on the bottom. They'll start with no smiley faces, and as time passes, gradually they'll earn those smiley faces, and they know when they get to the end, they get that reward. So this is just kind of a tangible thing that they can see rather than a timer or telling them 2 more minutes. It's it's something that they can see that they've earned that time along the way, and they know that they get that end activity that they want. Social stories are another thing that can help with those transitions, and this is an example of a social story that I'm going to a new school, say they're transitioning from the elementary school to the middle school or middle school to high school. You can make a social story up with, you could use a picture of each specific, school, the specific bus, the teacher, just to make it a lot more, real for them, and also give them, a preparation and kind of break down those steps to where they're, going to have a new school to be in. We did a social story when my family got a new dog. We had pictures of the dog and kind of prepared them for a couple weeks beforehand that, she was coming to our house. And so those are kind of things that you can do for field trips, for holidays, just to kind of give them that preparation for something that's not going to be a normal occurrence on their routine. And then breaking down tasks is another thing that can help. And so these are 2 examples of things that we have at my house to kind of foster that independence. So you can see they can be as simple as, using the toilet, and then the one on the right is washing your hands. You can just say, look at your schedule, or, follow the steps, or whatever wording you want to use. But this is just a way that we've really helped to increase my kids' independence, because a lot of times they can be dependent on someone telling them what to do step by step. And so this is just a way that they can kind of follow those steps themselves. It also gives them something, a beginning and an end to a task, which a lot of the time helps them a lot, because they know each step by hand, so they can do that on their own.
This is some of additional resources if there's a family that has a newly diagnosed child, or somebody that's just starting off. There is a online, the Navigating Iowa Systems of Care, a caregiver's guide that has the first steps after the diagnosis, which makes it easy for you to go through each step, and is a wonderful resource that's online. And then also here are some of the other resources as well. We have a newsletter that goes out by email every month that has all of the activities. It has training opportunities, family networking opportunities, all of those things. And on our website, which we'll show here on the last slide, you can sign up to get in the newsletter if you would like more information on autism. The Regional Autism Assistance Program, which is through the University of Iowa, also has a family navigator in all of their regions who can help set up services or help you with applying for funding as well, which is a great resource. And then also, Sesame Street has now introduced the Muppet with Autism and has books and different opportunities. And that has been just really a great resource for really young children that, to have the books read to them. And when they go to kindergarten, they often will already know about a classmate with autism because they have read these books or been involved in the activities as well. And then one of other things we wanted to mention too is the Iowa Public Television series did the Life Autistic, which explored challenges and successes of individuals in Iowa. It went through ages 2 to someone who was in their 60s. Tyler was one of the people that was featured about his driving and working. My daughter was also featured, but it's a wonderful program to actually see into the families' lives of those with autism and to give you a better understanding as well. And one thing we always like that one of our self-advocates always says is that normal is just a drier setting. Everyone with autism is unique in their own way. And he always just says too, if you've met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism because everyone is so different, but just has a lot of gifts to share as well. And here's the information if you want more information on activities or resources or the e-newsletter. One of the things that we do at the Autism Society of Iowa every year is we have the Autism Advocacy and Acceptance Day at the Iowa State Capitol. And Tyler's going to talk a little bit too about one of the experiences he had there that ended up making a difference for a whole lot of people in Iowa. Tyler?
Thanks, Kris. When I was at the Autism Day on the Hill at the Capitol before the COVID-19 pandemic began, I shared a story of how I was doing a church activity with the young adult ministry at the church I attend. We were going over to Val Lane's bowling alley, but unbeknownst to us, there was a hard rock concert going on at Val Air Ballroom, and the police were over there and they were pulling people over left and right. And I was one of the people that got pulled over, but little did I know that I would also be handcuffed and searched because they were trying to find someone who was doing drugs and marijuana, which I have never done in my life. So suffice to say, I was not too happy that I was accused of doing something like that. Then I shared my story at the Capitol and encouraged my state legislator to have a designation on driver's licenses that indicate the person has autism. It got attention and it became passed into law by the governor. In fact, just after I got my second vaccine, I got my driver's license updated to have that indication on it.
Thanks, Tyler. And it's kind of an example of Tyler's nervousness and his just behaviors that were normal for someone with autism, not being understood by the police officer. But now for both Iowa driver's license and state IDs, you can have the autism indicator right on there. So if through the DMV, and so that was a wonderful thing for which ended up being a really horrible experience for Tyler. It now has helped a lot of people in Iowa, and Cinder Bizignano realized that after talking to Tyler. So that just shows how a little bit of advocacy sometimes can make a difference for a lot of people. And we were thankful for Tyler being willing to share his story and to get that passed into law as well. So at this time, we can take questions if anybody has any.
My grandson was diagnosed, not diagnosed. He did not have autism at 2, but I've seen some behaviors now that I'm concerned about, but his parents don't want to admit it. So is it possible that he would not be diagnosed at 2, but at 5 he could be?
Yes, we even we have a self-advocates group, and we even have self-advocates who have been diagnosed in high school or later as well. So diagnosis can happen at any time during their life as well. We often sometimes will see that when a child gets diagnosed, a parent sometimes recognizes some of those traits in themselves, and sometimes realizes that they may have some of the traits of autism as well. So yeah, that diagnosis can happen at any time. Is he started kindergarten? Has this school said anything for them? Not
He
yet.
has been in daycare ever since he was 2, and he'll go to kindergarten next year.
Okay. Yeah,
So
and sometimes
that's going to be a strain for him.
yeah. Sometimes this school might see, some of those signs, and they have autism consultants like within the Heartland AEA or the Des Moines Public Schools, both do. And so sometimes somebody may come to do an evaluation and that way, and it may happen that way as well.
And it was the Heartland AEA that did the first evaluation.
Okay, yeah. And so yeah.
I mean, he's been getting along fine in preschool, and he does all the activities and everything, but they just thought he didn't eat very well.
Okay, yeah. And there are sometimes, Erin can talk about this a little bit more, but sometimes just some assistance, or there's some feeding clinics too, and some things sometimes that help. Is he increasing his the foods that he likes now?
Yeah, he is, but he'll only eat like 1 or 2 bites of something, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we went through an eating clinic for my son through ChildServe. He was already getting speech and OT and PT through ChildServe, and so I had mentioned that we were having struggles with eating, and so the feeding clinic was great for us as parents to kind of learn how to introduce those foods, because there's a process. You don't just make them try it initially. With my son, we have to get him to just allow it on the table with him. Sometimes, we have to get him to just touch it with his finger. So there is a longer process, but I have found that if my kids' friends eat stuff, sometimes they'll eat it, because they will eat more things at school, I find, than they eat at home, because their friends, peer pressure is strong, and they will want to try something that they see their friends try. So yeah, I would just encourage him to try new things, and like Kris said, when he gets into school, if they see those behaviors, it might lead to further.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem.
I have a question, because it's a little bit too late now. My son is in his 30s, but he always had a tic. And when I would say, stop doing this, he would then do another thing, okay? Is it possible that he had some kind of autism that I was totally ignorant of?
Usually you have to, in order for that diagnosis, you usually have to have several, like it's kind of a list going down, and you usually have to have several of those checked off. You know, maybe a communication deficit, some sensory issues, your social communication skills. And so it just based on one thing may not be, but if he had, you know, several of those others that you could just check off the list, especially the things that we went through, that's more when you go in for a diagnosis, what they will look for.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think we had a comment here in the chat room as well. It says, I am a former teacher who thinks my 70-year-old sister definitely has some autistic traits. I'm sure she would reject any diagnosis, but is there anything I could do to help her, especially since she is so fearful? She is irrational. You know, there are some things you could do to help. One of them would be, if she's fearful, is it because she doesn't understand what's going to come next? So that you could, you know, maybe write some things out. Like we showed the social story for children, but you can do those for adults as well, to maybe just send a, you know, write almost like a letter to say what's going to come next. If she's just, you know, fearful even of transitioning to something new or going out, sometimes that will help too. You know, first, you know, we're going to get on your code, and then, you know, we are going to the grocery store, and here's what we are going to do, just really explaining things. Is that kind of what you meant by being fearful? So I'm not sure if we answered that question correctly, but is that kind of what you had in mind? Oh, it says she foresees all of the worst case scenarios. Don't walk in the woods because of rattlesnakes. Okay. Yeah. Some of that, just trying to really explain things like, you know, if we do see a rattlesnake, this is what we're going to do. So we can walk in the woods. I think sometimes that that is part of not knowing what to expect, and then also for always just thinking the worst. And so it is helpful just to really over explain things, to also really break it down into pieces that are easy for her to understand, and to try to get through that, because it is just that fear of the unknown for a lot of them, which is really hard. So if they know, you know, here's plan A, here's plan B, and it's all written out and easy to do, and then also broken up into parts, which are really easy to understand, I think that would be a great way to help her too. So Tyler, do you have anything to add? Or when you get really worried or aren't sure what to think, or it might be the worst case scenario, are there some tactics that you would like to share that might be helpful?
Yeah, sometimes when it comes to those situations, I could like go into a room and collect my thoughts. I've also been talking to a counselor about all that's been happening with the world, and she has given me some good advice. I also um, maybe watch a video that makes me happy, or do like puzzle books. or just talking to a family member about what's going on. That helps too.
Thanks, Tyler. I see there's also a question. I think it says, does autism run? I think it might mean, does it run in the family? And there is a genetic, component to autism. And there's some studies being done on that. One of the studies is actually the Spark lab, which is at the University of Iowa, where they take swabs and look at some of the genetic makeup of the family members. And so that some with autism, there is a genetic component to that. So the answer would be yes for some. Yeah. And Erin, I think you have done the study, correct?
Yeah, we have. Well, we started the study. We had issues with my son getting his sample done, so we're still working on that. But I would say that there's just in the example with my family that we've got 2 kids that are both affected. But I also think if you look back at older generations and people in your family, you might see those examples. So which we definitely do on both sides of our family. So I'll be interested to see what Spark comes back with when we get our test results. And I know they said that their Spark's really interested in the familial ties that they're finding. So
Do you think the pandemic has any effect on autism people?
I do, and Tyler can talk. He just talked
Yes.
about that a little bit. Tyler, do you want to share? Do you mind sharing what you've kind of gone through during the pandemic?
Yeah, there were a lot of things that were changes, and it was overwhelming for me with cancellations of things I was going to do with friends, in-person stuff moving virtually, Special Olympic stuff being altered. There were a lot of emotions that ran through my mind, and it even led me to the point where I had to take a leave of absence from work.
And Tyler, what have you done now to help you with that?
Not read so much on social media about this stuff, and talking with the counselors, as I mentioned before, and also doing stuff that makes me feel good.
Thanks,
Thank
Tyler.
you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
No, but I really appreciated this. This is going to really help my daughter, and it'll help me when I go visit my granddaughter.
Well, thank you for joining us. Like I said, if you have other questions or need resources, don't hesitate, just email us or call as well, because we're always willing to help.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you to our presenters for sharing their experience, their understanding. Participants, do keep an eye on your email. Sometime probably later next week, you will get an email with a survey link. It will also have a link to this recording so that you can rewatch or share with anyone who you think might benefit. And I will try to get that list of resources and get that sent on as well. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
so much.
Bye-bye.